Blue Jackets versus Blackhawks. How did the game go? Which team has a brighter future? We'll break it all down next on this edition of Locked On NHL Game Night.
When that final horn sounds, you know it's time for Locked On NHL Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before. Only on Locked On NHL Game Night. Your team every day.
Hey, hockey fans, welcome to Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, your teams every day. Thanks for making Locked On NHL Game Night your place to get a recap of the night in the NHL during the regular season and the playoffs. We are available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. If you're a new customer, you can bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. If your first bet wins, make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over for football. Last call for football on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. I'm Eddie Garcia, an LA Kings fan out on the West Coast and the host of Locked On LA Kings. He is Shukri Wrights, a Boston Bruins fan on the East Coast and the host and producer at 97.5 The Fanatic in Philadelphia. Together, we're here to get you caught up on all the goals, saves, big moments, and stories from the night in the NHL with an assist from our Locked On local experts. Normally, we have more than one game to discuss, but that is not the case for this Friday. We had 15 games on Thursday, and we had just one game on Friday.
You notice how we both put up one finger at the same time? It was just going from a buffet to just saying, hey, here's just a burger for you. Fine edition. No other side. Just a one burger. And now I'm starving.
If you wanted to watch more than one game, the NHL said, no, you will not watch more than one game. But that one game was in Chicago, where the Blackhawks were taking on the Blue Jackets. Interesting game, kind of a first period where there wasn't a lot going on until the final minute, when both teams scored with under 60 seconds to play. Charlie Coyle gets his 13th of the year on the power play with 47 seconds left. Looked like the Blue Jackets going to take the lead in intermission, but no. Connor Bedard scores his 22nd of the year with 3 seconds left. We were tied at 1-1 after one.
It was a very interesting back and forth period where I thought that Chicago, they were just a little bit sloppy, but nothing like completely crazy. But I thought it was a really good pace early starts of the game, where back and forth, there was definitely a lot of back and forth action between both teams. Both goaltenders, Merzlikins and as well as like Spencer Knight, like they both like showed up well, especially in the early going in that first period. But as the first period progressed, I thought that the ice started to tilt in the favor of Columbus a bit, and it certainly showed, especially when Charlie Coyle put the Blue Jackets ahead on the power play goal with just about 46 seconds left in that first period, and then Connor Bedard said, "Ha ha! Hold your deep dish pizza, I got you," and tied it. And it was just the type of first period that that if you thought there was going to be uninspiring, disinteresting, you were dead wrong, because this was a really fun first period to watch for both teams playing.
It was Columbus getting 14 shots on goal to Chicago's 8, but in the end tied 1-1 after one. Second period was more Blue Jackets. Charlie Coyle would strike again, his 14th of the year, unassisted. A really terrible giveaway by Andrei Burakovsky in his own zone. Yeah. Try to pass through the middle, and if you're going to make that pass, you have to be 100% sure that you're going to connect. He didn't. It was intercepted, and Coyle took advantage. Then Matthew Olivier would score to give Columbus a 2-goal advantage. Good screen in front of the goaltender, Spencer Knight, and a nice little one-time shot into the net. Chicago would get the final goal of the period. Another one of their young stars, Frank Nazar, his 7th of the year. So you got the 2 young stars for Chicago, Bedard and Nazar, both on the board. But after 2 periods, it would be Columbus holding the 3-2 advantage.
And you know something? The difference in this game came down to who was going to play a much more disciplined brand of hockey. I thought that there were times in this game through the first two periods that Chicago was just a tad bit sloppy. That the goal in which that Charlie Coyle scored, which was an unassisted goal, like that was a prime example of a terrible turnover in which that in the National Hockey League, these are the type of turnovers that leads to the puck being in the back of your own net. And that's exactly what ended up happening. And Charlie Coyle, being a veteran that he is, knew exactly what to do. And ultimately, Chicago paid a dear price, and Columbus took full advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because Burakovsky is not one of the young guys for Chicago. He's been around the block. He knows better than to make that play. But I guess it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter how old you are, and we can still all make mistakes. But that was certainly not what you're looking for if you're Chicago, from one of your vets to make a play like that to put you in a hole or help to put you in a hole. So we go to the third period. It's still a 1-goal game. I thought, Columbus was looking to kind of protect the lead a little bit, as will happen. Chicago being a little bit more aggressive. They did outshoot the Columbus Blue Jackets in the third period 8-3, but could not get the equalizer. They had a golden opportunity late on a power play, and Connor Bedard had it on his stick with a wide open net, and he shoots it over the net. Maybe the puck was bouncing a little bit. He obviously didn't get it on his stick to where it needed to be. He was on the bench with his head on the boards. Couldn't believe he missed that one. And that would be Chicago's best opportunity. Columbus would finish it off with an empty net goal. Charlie Coyle gets his 15th of the year, 3 goals for the hat trick. Great stat on the broadcast. Don't know if you heard it. 31st hat trick this month.
Yeah.
And that's the most hat tricks in a month in NHL history. Why that would be the case, who knows? But it was a month of hat tricks here in January of 2026 for Charlie Coyle, his second career hat trick. And oh, by the way, this is a guy very quietly is an unrestricted free agent after this season. He's 33 years old. And we're going to talk a little bit later on whether the Blue Jackets or the Blackhawks might be buyers or sellers. And this is Charlie Coyle, pretty good player. Could be a veteran player that could be a nice addition as a center for a team. But he will have to see what the Blue Jackets decide to do with him. But a nice night for him. Elvis Merzlikins in net gets the win. He allowed 2 goals on 29 shots. Pretty close competitive game, but in the end, Columbus able to take advantage of their opportunities, and Chicago just not able to enough to get the victory.
And there it is right there. Chicago's inability to take advantage of opportunities cost them dearly in this game, because what I find to be ironic is that Connor Bedard is that opportunity to score to tie it up late in the third period. You thought with the way that things were rolling, the way that Chicago, by the way, they were buzzing in Columbus's zone, in which that at one point, you know how, Eddie, like you being a veteran, knowing the league as well as you do, like when you see a team that is, creating pressure in the offensive zone, you just know and have that feeling that at some point the dam is about to break. In Chicago, they were putting that pressure. Connor Bedard had a beautiful opportunity to score, and unfortunately, he just couldn't bury it. And when you don't take advantage of your opportunities, it's not often you get, another opportunity as golden as that one was. And ultimately, Charlie Coyle, scoring the empty netter goal for the hat trick. And also to your point about hat tricks, this has been an incredible month for hat tricks in the NHL. Like no other month in the history of this league. We're talking about over 108 years of history of the National Hockey League. Has there been a month where there has been more hat tricks than this one? And if you like goals, you have gotten them in spades. And, you've gotten, hat tricks from your likely sources in some rather unlikely. Charlie Coyle, you could put him in the unlikely category, only his second career hat trick. But man, this was one heck of a game to watch in terms of the back and forth affair, like in terms of a team that took advantage of opportunities. The other team didn't, in the Chicago Blackhawks. But then also Charlie Coyle, continuing his torrid stretch of hockey, because he has been on fire of late offensively for the Blue Jackets as well.
And with 14 games coming up on Saturday, one more day left in the month, would not be surprised if we saw at least one more hat trick.
Yeah.
Do you want to get a report on this one from one of the hosts of the teams involved? We are happy to have a report from the host of Locked On Columbus Blue Jackets, Jay Forster, to give us his thoughts on this game.
I personally think that we should consider just keeping Charlie Coyle forever. Big win for the Blue Jackets, 4-2 over the Chicago Blackhawks. Yeah, I know it's only Chicago who are struggling at the minute, but that's 4 wins in a row. The Blue Jackets are keeping pace with the rest of the Eastern Conference. They improved to 59 points on the season, which I think is good for the first or second team outside of the wildcard spot. 6 points out of that third seed in the Metro. Hat trick for Charlie Coyle, like that's the big story, right? Like he has been truly lights out, especially the past 2 or 3 weeks or so, and he hit another level tonight. I thought he was truly brilliant. 4-point night, like I said, the hat trick, and a goal from Matthew Olivier as well, which we always love to see, right? So big win. Back at it again tomorrow against St. Louis, who really have nothing to lose at this point. We'll talk about all of that on tomorrow morning's Locked On Blue Jackets.
All right, thanks to Jay Forster for that. You might be able to recognize the accent on Jay. He's in the UK supporting the Blue Jackets, and he recorded that about 4 a.m. his time. So we thank him for his dedication to getting us that report. He says, keep Charlie Coyle. We'll see if the Blue Jackets listen to him or not. We're going to talk more about the Blue Jackets and Blackhawks, and do either of these teams still have a shot at the playoffs this year? Who has a brighter future? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On NHL Game Night. It is the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. Seahawks versus Patriots in a Super Bowl rematch from a few years back. It is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with the special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. Head to that Super Bowl party, eat, drink, have fun, and make it even more fun with FanDuel. It is the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, football season is over for a while. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Chicago Blackhawks and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Let us start with the Blackhawks. 55 games into the season, they've got a record of 21, 25, and 9 on the season. They check in with 51 points on the year. They are currently 8 points behind the Anaheim Ducks for the final wildcard spot in the West. So they have some work to do, obviously, if they're going to try and get back into this thing. What are your thoughts? Do the Blackhawks have a shot to get back into this wildcard race in the West, or is it time for them to kind of start thinking about next season?
I'm going to say they don't have a chance to get into the into in terms of the playoff race in the West. I personally just think that if you're Chicago, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, perhaps right now, like, we're better off served, like, looking ahead to next season. And honestly, I just think that, for Chicago, yes, they're 8 points back of the second wild card spot in the Western Conference, 8 points back of the Anaheim Ducks. But you look at the teams who are ahead of them, like the Sharks, the Kings, and the Predators. I just think that the Blackhawks, they're not there yet, even though I think that some of the young guys on the Blackhawks this season have taken some strides forward. Connor Bedard, even though he did miss time with the injury earlier this year, but Connor Bedard comes to mind. Frank Nazar is another one that comes to mind, and a continual maturation of their goaltender Spencer Knight as well. I do think that that they still have a ways to go. I really like Connor Murphy, their young defenseman, as well. Even though, like, he's a little north of 30, but still, I just think that Chicago, they're not there yet. They're not there yet in terms of being ready to compete as of this year. Maybe next year they are, But I look at them and say, I think about the teams that are ahead of them, the Predators. I think they are dangerous if they could, continue to like, play good hockey and actually get on a roll that's going to put them in a playoff spot. Maybe they can make some noise. But San Jose has proven to me that they are not going around. They are lurking in the water. No pun intended to the Sharks, but I just think that also in terms of the Kings, not forgetting about them as well, as maddening as they have looked at times offensively, they're still very much in the thick of things. So for me, I think the Blackhawks, they're not ready yet. Maybe next year, but for this year, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking ahead to next season. But they still have a little to go before they're back in terms of being a playoff contender.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if you're Chicago, as long as things don't take some sort of major nosedive between now and the end of the season, you'll
Yeah,
look at this season as progress. I think they have been better than a lot of us thought they would be. Maybe the injury to Bedard did kind of knock him off course a little bit for a while.
yeah, it
But
did.
he's also had a positive season. So when it's all said and done, it was a step in the right direction. Not as great as you would have liked it to be when you look at some of the other surprise teams around the NHL, and even some of the younger teams in the West, like San Jose and Anaheim. They certainly
Yeah.
took steps forward, and they look like they could very well be playoff teams where Chicago's not. But still, I think when it's all said and done, I think if you're Chicago, you think this is still been a positive step. There's still work to do. And if we can sell off maybe some veterans at the deadline to help us in the future, get some younger assets, prospects, picks, that kind of thing, I don't know that Chicago needs to be looking at the deadline at being a big seller. I think they
No.
can be selective, but if there are some pieces that they can sell off, they're certainly looking to sell. They're not buyers. They're either going to stand pat or they're maybe looking to sell off some specific pieces.
I think they're sellers. Because I do think that there are a couple of players that perhaps that could be available, like at the trade deadline that could be good, rentals, for teams that are contending and so forth. Like for me, like I just look at Chicago and I say, like they have good quality veterans on this team. Like for me, I look at a player like Tyler Bertuzzi, what he could do for a playoff contender or even a team that's looking to contend for a Stanley Cup, and I would even go as far as to say like maybe Ryan Donato, for example, is another example. But I do think they do have pieces that could potentially be moved. I'm not saying that any of those guys are definitively going to get traded, but no, but I do think that the Blackhawks are more likely to be sellers more than anything, and they do have veteran pieces that if they have or if they receive like an appropriate return, I could see that. I could see it actually happening.
For Columbus, 27-20-7 on the year. They've got 53 games played right now on the season. They check in with 59 points. Now, there's 7 points out of a wild card spot in the East. However, as was pointed out by Jay Forster, they are only 6 points out of the third spot in the Metropolitan Division behind the New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins, who each have 65 points. So it's slightly better a chance at maybe getting that third spot in the Metro than getting one of the wild card spots. Either way, it will be an uphill battle. And you might say, how have the Blue Jackets not gained any ground? Because they're 7-1 now since Rick Bowness took over
Yeah,
as head coach. And yet, when they made the coaching change, they were 7 points out of a wild card spot. So now they're 8 points out with a team going 7-1. So how is that possible? Well, you look at the teams they've been chasing. Boston, as you well know, Shu, 7-1-1. Pittsburgh 6-0, and Buffalo is 7-2-1 over that same stretch. So they have not been able to gain any ground at all because of how well these other teams that they have been chasing have played. So they made the coaching change to try and see if they could kickstart the rest this year. It's worked, but they haven't seen the results of it that they were hoping to see. The change has made them better. They're playing better hockey, but
yeah.
unfortunately, everyone else is playing better in front of them.
And that's exactly how the Blue Jackets have not been able to, like gain any sort of like real ground in the playoff races. Not because they've been playing like bad hockey. They've actually been red hot The problem, the Boston Bruins, for an example, they're 10-1-1 in their last 12 games. They've been on a heater themselves. Montreal, who dominated the best team in the NHL just last night again in the Colorado Avalanche in Montreal. I do think that they also have made us allow a statement for themselves, as well as, ironically enough, both Montreal and Boston are the two teams that are holding the two wild card spots in the East. So for Columbus, I do think that they're definitely a playoff contender this year. The problem is that the teams that they're chasing, they've also been playing extremely well, i.e. the Buffalo Sabres as another prime example of that. And that's part of the reason why, like, tomorrow night's game, one of the games that you and I will be talking about on NHL Game Night tomorrow night, the Hockey Night in Canada game between Montreal and Buffalo is massive tomorrow night. And you talk about the Blue Jackets in terms of their chase, like, this is a massive game in terms that's either going to help Columbus or it's going to hurt Columbus in terms of whatever either team does in that game tomorrow night. So for me, I look at the fact that, one, the Blue Jackets, they're getting healthier. Two, I also look at the fact that the guys who have been underperforming are now starting to perform like they're fully capable of performing, like this season. And for me, like, I do think there's something to be said about the guys like Kirill Marchenko, who has been an important piece of this turnaround for the Blue Jackets, and as well as Mason Marchment, and as we talked about earlier, Charlie Coyle as well, and not to be forgotten about about Zach Werenski. But when hasn't Zach Werenski been playing well? So I think ultimately Columbus, they have to continue to play well, but you also need teams like Montreal, Boston, and Buffalo to lose, which they just haven't so far.
You look at the Blue Jackets as far as maybe being buyers or sellers. They have some interesting UFAs coming up at the end of the year. We talked about Charlie Coyle. Mason Marchment, who they picked up in a trade, is another guy that could be very attractive to other teams. He's that kind of a player that's a playoff performer. Their captain, Boone Jenner, is a UFA after this year. So there are some interesting decisions that Columbus is going to have to make between now and then. Do they want to re-sign some of these guys? Do they want to move them? Do they want to keep them for this stretch run? Be very interested to see what their GM, Don Waddell, decides to do.
And that's what's going to be an influence in terms of what the general manager does, is that if he's able to agree to some sort of a contract extension with some of the UFAs, I think that will certainly prevent like the Blue Jackets from making any sort of deals, especially for guys like Charlie Coyle or Boone Jenner, those guys getting traded at the deadline potentially. But if you're going to agree to new deals with any of the potential UFAs for Columbus, now's the time that you need to be a bit more aggressive in trying to get those deals done, because once we come back from the Olympic break, I hate to break it to you, but now the sprint really begins for the Stanley Cup playoffs, and you have to make decisions very, very quickly short after. So I think if you're Columbus, now is the time to try to get a couple of those deals done.
Yeah, I believe when they come back from the break, the trade deadline is like a week away or maybe less. So it's coming
March
up.
6th. Yeah.
So decisions after the Olympic break are going to definitely have to be made very, very quickly if they haven't made the decisions already, what they're going to do. The Blue Jackets, the only team in the NHL that has made a coaching change so far this year, as we talked about. Rick Bowness coming in, replacing Dean Evison. Are we going to see any more coaching changes? Plus, we have an outdoor game coming up over the weekend to talk about. We'll do that next here on Locked On NHL Game Night. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with your customers. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can keep everything with your existing number as well. And Quo's smart AI tools automatically log calls, summarize conversations, and highlight next steps so details never slip through the cracks. It's no surprise that Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses from solo operators to growing teams. Make this year the year no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnhl. That's QUO.com/lockedonnhl. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. If you've been an NHL fan for any length of time, you know that coaches coming and going is not something that is a surprise. It happens probably more in the NHL than in any other sport, but not the case this year. Only one coaching change, and that was the Columbus Blue Jackets, as we mentioned earlier. And as we also touched on, you've got the Olympic break coming up next week, and then, to the trade deadline. So the season is moving rapidly at this point. And you would think if there were going to be coaching changes made, they probably would have been made by now. And when you look at how many teams are still potentially alive for a playoff run, maybe that has played a factor as well, as teams saying, well, we don't need to change the coach. Our team is in the mix. I'm still a little surprised, though, that we've only seen one, to be honest. And at this point, I don't know if we're going to see any other ones. I thought maybe Craig Berube in Toronto, and maybe that's still on the table. I don't know. It's certainly been a very disappointing season for the Maple Leafs, as it doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs. So we'll see. But I would have thought there would have been more by now. I'm a little surprised there's only been one.
I'm surprised too. And I think the part that has me most shocked is not the fact that there's only been one, but Eddie, if you really think about it, it's the fact that so many teams up until recently have all been in the playoff race by and large, but especially in the East, when you talk about like teams like Buffalo, like you would have expected it, let's say 2 months ago, but they have been on such a historic heater that they're not going to be making any changes with the head coach. Like, I mean, they're literally they're in third place right now in the Atlantic Division, so no changes there in Buffalo. And then also, the part that gets me, the New York Rangers, they just hired a brand new coach in Mike Sullivan. They're what, dead last in the East right now? Like, they're not going to make any changes at the head coach either there. So I think in the East, it's been both surprising but also jarring that it's only been the one head coach that is that's been changed so far. Dean Everson for Rick Bowness in Columbus. But if you look in the West, I think also what has also got me is the fact that that a lot of these teams have either been, number one, they were in a playoff spot at one point, or two, they were a playoff team a year ago, but this year they have kind of like fallen off a cliff a little bit. I'm talking about the Winnipeg Jets as an example. I don't think they're going to be moving off of Scott O'Neill anytime soon anyway. So I think if anything else, and including the St. Louis Blues, another playoff team from a year ago with Jim Montgomery, they're currently what, like two or three spots from the bottom of the Western Conference. So I just think that it has been surprising to see the lack of change at head coaches this year in the NHL, because so many of the teams who were playoff in playoff position a year ago, they're not in playoff positioning now, and I guess management is just saying, you know what, we're not gonna like make any hasty moves at this point in time.
Real quick, for people who may not have seen it, maybe it wasn't on your radar, we do have an outdoor game coming up this weekend. On Sunday. Your Boston Bruins are taking on the Lightning down in Tampa. I don't remember the name of these stadiums anymore. It's where the Buccaneers play, is where they're playing. The names of these places change so fast, I don't recall anymore.
Oh, for sure.
Are you excited about this as a Bruins fan? I know you guys have played in plenty of these outdoor games, or is this just like another game?
I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited because of the fact that in the year that the Bruins were expected to, to just kind of like be like a bridge type of year, they have been, in my opinion, one of the big surprises in the NHL this year. So for them to go down to Tampa Bay to play the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I think this season they have been like the class of the East, I think that's going to be a fantastic game to watch. And for me, like I think this matchup is going to be an interesting litmus test as well, for the Boston Bruins to see where are they in their development in terms of, is this team truly for real? I think overall that they are, but this Lightning team that has shown me so much this season from the likes of what I've seen from, Guntel, from Kucherov, Point, and everybody else. I think the Bruins, this is going to be a real test for them on Sunday in the outdoor game. But I'm excited to watch.
Yeah, it should be it's definitely a good matchup. I always like seeing these games in different locations as much as I like Fenway Park and Wrigley Field and all those kind of places. It will be nice to see it in a different place, in a different atmosphere, and good for the folks of Tampa. They've been very good hockey fans ever since that franchise has come into existence. So good to see them get rewarded with one of the marquee events as far as the NHL schedule is concerned. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On NHL Game Night. If you want complete coverage of your favorite NHL team, find the Locked On NHL Team podcast and YouTube show for your squad. As for Locked On NHL Game Night, we're here for you each and every night covering the NHL until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. For Shukri Wrights, I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day.